Hello, I'm Stan. Welcome to my channel. Today we're here to discuss the custom settings for Sony A7 IV, A7S3, A1 and A7R4, so any Alpha series from the Sony mirrorless cameras, and also the back focus button. I'm going to walk you through what is my usual workflow when I get a new camera, what are my custom settings, what are the options I found for the custom buttons, all the customizations I found, what is my workflow for stills, for videos, and the custom buttons for play situations as well when you want to review your work and your video or your stills. And I'm going to conclude with what I found the best utilization of the hold focus button on the lenses. Most Sony lenses, the GM series, but the newest, the most recent releases of Sony lenses, including the Sigma ones, so other vendors are following Sony as well, they do have an additional button on the Sony lenses. So I'm going to discuss what I found that useful for when I'm using it as well. So stick to the end and we're going to have a great session. Why would you want to watch this? So if you have recently bought one of the Alpha series bodies from Sony and you're looking at what is the best settings that you should use for the customization, how you should customize your settings, what are your shortcuts, and if you want to optimize the usage and the speed that you are able to control and use your camera, then this video is for you. Who is this video for? It's for the enthusiast photographers and for the professional photographers, as well as the videographers as well. I will touch upon some potential great usage of the custom settings and custom buttons in video. What is good about A7 IV? These settings can now be dedicated between stills and video, while in the previous version A7 III they were all the same, so you would have to change them when you're switching between shooting videos and stills. You would have to reconfigure. So first thing I'm doing when I buy a new camera, I'm checking the firmware it has been shipped with. It's called RTM or whatever the release to manufacturer firmware version. That's the software version it was installed within the camera. The A7 IV released in December 2021, which is when I'm filming this, has been released with version 1.0. But in most of the cases, and most of the vendors and the manufacturers are releasing new improved firmware version very soon after they release the product. So check you are on the latest software. Why is that important? There are particular stability fixes, there are improvements, new features, and also known issues that are resolved that come in this new firmware. So there's a whole discussion on a product cycle. I can talk about that. There are some situations when I'm not keeping to the latest firmware, like it is the case with the A7 III. I'm on the 3.01 firmware version, and there is a reason for that, so I'm gonna address that in a different video dedicated. If there is interest from you and you like me to touch upon that topic of life cycle of a product into a manufacturer. Second thing I'm doing, I'm looking for a setting that allows me to disable taking photos without the card being inserted into the camera. So any vendor would have such settings, either Canon, Nikon or Sony, they would have such settings. So second thing I'm doing is making sure the camera doesn't take pictures without a card inserted into it. You never know when you are in a situation you quickly change cards, or you are under pressure, your card is full and something happened and you are under the impression you have changed the card, and then you forget and you might lose an important period of that session. You might lose the valuable photos from that session. Third thing is I'm checking the auto rotate option. So sometimes between portrait and landscape it can be disruptive. You might want to check that auto rotation option for some manufacturer only for the PC when you're viewing them on the PC, but not on the camera. Depending on your preferences, you might want to look at that. Fourth thing I'm checking is the default action when you want to delete a photo. I don't like to default to a cancel and then need to change it to default. Obviously that's not relevant when you have a camera that has touch, because you can simply touch the option you want. But in case you are used like with A7 III, which had a pseudo touch screen which worked only for the focus or zooming in the play section, in that case you want your delete first option to be on the delete. So you just quickly click OK, or you can also set delete, press delete twice and it delete the photo. So setting the erase default button to erase. Fifth thing I'm checking is the setting for magnification. So what is my magnification, default magnification scale? So first of all, I'm selecting it to magnify on the focus point. That allows me quickly to know if my photo was sharp and I achieved what I wanted to achieve in the capture. And at the same time, it goes 1:1. So that would be the maximum focus you can get. And it will go into 1:1 magnification, and I can quickly realize if my photo is perfectly sharp or I need to retake it. So due to either misconfiguration or camera focused in the wrong place, it was unable to track the subject, or because the subject was moving. So I just want to make sure that capture is perfectly sharp. So in order to do that, I enable the magnification to the focus point in a 1:1 scale. Before we go into the custom buttons, and I give you a context there, and also before I share what my custom buttons are, I like first to share what my menus options are, or shortcuts or quick menu. So most of the vendors have in their OS a quick menu or shortcuts or favorites or whatever you want to call them. So that is very helpful again in a situation, let's say you are shooting a wedding or you're shooting very fast, high pace action, but you need to change quickly, and that's what I like to share with you now. So I'm going to look at my A7 IV and I'm talking about my menu settings now. So the first option is subject selecting settings. My first shortcut or my first option in the quick menu is called subject selecting settings. This allows me to select the option for the eye detection. Is it going to be a model for humans? Is it going to be for birds? Or is it going to be for animals? So depending on what subject I'm shooting, yes, you can have them all three. But let's suppose I'm only shooting animals. I'm going to deselect the human to help the camera have less option and focus. It already knows I should focus on this model and try to detect the eyes for animals, for instance. That's the first option I have in my menu. Moving on, second option is the register faces. With a Sony mirrorless Alpha series, you can register up to 5 faces, which, let's suppose you are taking a group shot and you are at a wedding. You want first the bride's face to always be in focus in any group shots. So more than likely there are going to be a different focal distance to your sensor. And if you are using a shallow depth of field, it is impossible to have all the faces in focus, but you want to make sure the main subject is always in focus. So in this case, priority 1 would be the bride, priority 2 would be the groom, for instance, priority 3 would be bride's mom or bride's dad, priority 4 would be the groom's mom, and so forth. So that's how I do it before a wedding. I'm trying to do that in the preparations before the religious ceremony starts. And that will help the camera make a decision when it has multiple faces into a frame, to make a decision which face to keep in focus. So that is very useful. So I'm adding a shortcut there to quickly train my camera and take a photo in the preparation, like bride preparation stages or groom preparation stages. The third option I'm having in the quick menu is format. So if I need to format, I quickly go there and I'll be able to format a card. Not that I will need it during a shoot, during a wedding, but you might need it in particular cases when you introduce a new card and you forgot to format it at home. You can quickly format it. The fourth option I have in my menu, it's airplane mode. The airplane mode allows me to get as much as possible from the battery. I don't need wireless, I don't need Bluetooth. For A7 III, I don't need NFC during the shooting, so I keep the airplane modes on, which switches any wireless transmission of any sort, and that helps my battery to be used for focusing and tracking the stabilization, for instance, to write the photos into the camera's buffer and so forth. So that will help me preserve my battery and last longer. And the last but not the least option is anti-flicker setting. So what does this help? In particular situation with artificial light, you will have a flickering because of the frequency that that power network is sending the electricity through the light bulb. You don't see that with your human eye because there is an inertia in our eyesight, so that looks smooth. But in your camera, you will be able to see it if you shoot silence mode. I'm talking about A7 IV, A7 III, yes? So what is good about A7 IV is that you have customizable frequency that you can tune so that your camera is in step with the frequency of the light. And I can quickly get there in that situation if I'm not using I decide not to use a mechanical shutter, which is unlikely if you need to use, if you want to avoid roller shutter, or if you want to shoot with a flash, with fill-in flash. But for there are situations when I'm in an environment where artificial light is used, then I can, and I still need to use silent, I can quickly tune my frequency for my anti-flicker setting to be in step and in tune with the artificial light oscillating frequency. Moving on, this concludes the shortcuts or quick menu settings I have on my A7 IV. Now, we're going to discuss about the custom buttons in both stills, video and play menus. Just to give a bit of context, starting with Canon and 5D series, in particular with 5D Mark IV, that DSLR gave a lot of possibilities to the customers to customize their own buttons. And soon after that, both Sony and Canon and all the major players realized how important this feature was for both professional photographers and enthusiasts to give them the opportunity and possibility to customize their own functions. And this has become very popular. Therefore, you have these options available and customization of all the buttons in Sony Alpha series as well. So that's what we're going to discuss now. So where do you find the custom settings in the newly redesigned Sony Alpha menu? Go to the setup, which is the last option at the bottom lower corner, then go to Operation Customize. So Setup, Operation Customize. You will find custom key for stills, custom keys for video, custom keys for playback. So we're going to start with custom keys for stills. We're looking now at the rear view, and you can see you have numbers starting from top right corner anti-clockwise order. So you look at AE lock, that's exposure lock hold. When would you use this? I don't use it that much today because I'm doing the metering now on the focus points. But let's suppose you have a very high dynamic scene and you want to make sure you don't lose highlights, you don't lose details in a high exposed area, like let's suppose bride dress. So you can expose on the bride's dress, the most important for you to get exposed correctly. Then you lock the exposure and then you find your focus point. If that's different than where you are taking your metering from, that's when you would use this setting. So I'll keep that as default. Next option is going to be the AF on. The AF on, this is the autofocus on button. If you recall it from DSLR time, you would use this one for focus and recompose technique, because the DSLR had only a very limited focus points available, like 6D in Canon had only 11 points, then they moved to 42, and the 5D Mark IV brought more focus, but they will never cover the entire screen area, only the center. Because of that limitation, you would focus on the eye of your subject and then recompose the photo while you wanted to keep the eye in focus, but the new composition was not matching with your focus point. So that's when you would use the autofocus back button for focus and recompose. With the mirrorless cameras, doing this operation is completely unnecessary because now you can track the eye wherever it moves. So personally, I'm not using the AF focus for focusing anymore. So what did I do? I set that button to switch between right and left eye. So with A7 IV, you have the option to do this because by default is on auto, and the camera decides which eye should be in focus, and usually is the one that's closer to your camera. But if you want to recompose in the sense of focusing on the other eye, I simply release the focus button and I press this one, and the camera now will try to focus and track the other eye. Moving on, the next custom button is the C1. I'm using this for focus magnifier and stills. You can check the focus by enlarging the image before shooting. Unlike the auto magnifier in manual focus, you can magnify the image without operating the focus ring. So there are situations when I will need to make sure the focus it's completely sharp on where I want it. For that situation, I'll just press the C1 and I'll be able to magnify for particular landscapes and other situations. Now, next custom button is going to be the C3, which is actually switch focus area. So by default, I'm using the wide area. This sets the type of focusing frame when shooting with autofocus. So in autofocus, I'm switching between different areas. So let's suppose for wildlife, I usually want to have only the center for the auto detection because I can reframe afterwards. I'm usually far anyway. In here, I'm quickly switching between different focus modes in autofocus settings. Once I'm happy with all the settings I've managed to do, I'm going to register them into the C1. Number 5, which is custom button 4, is the one down here that sets the touch operations of the screen on or off, and that's the default value. Now, let's move on to the rear 2, or second part of the rear button. So you were talking about this. Number 1 is what happens if you press the joystick. What I set that for is register AF, or autofocus area toggle. When I'm usually in the tracking mode, but I want to switch to a single point where I can move it, I just press this button, and that's much faster than pressing the touch screen to change the focusing touch behavior of the screen. In that case, I'm just pressing the joystick and then I can move my focus point using the joystick or the area on the touch screen. This way I can focus wherever I need to. For the number 2, in this case in the rear 2, I'm using the center button to switch between full frame and S35 or APS-C. That's helpful when I'm doing wildlife or I'm trying to photograph a very far object and I'm using a, let's say, 10 to 400 millimeter lens or 200 to 600 millimeter lens. I'm just pressing here. It's going to toggle between full frame of the sensor and the APS-C, the crop version. That will help me with the reach. Moving on, the drive mode. So if I'm pressing left on the wheel, left button on the wheel, I'm switching on the drive mode of the focusing. So should it be static, automatic, or continuous? And on the right side of the wheel, I can go directly to the ISO. Usually I keep that on auto when I take photos. What is different here than the default is the picture profile. The picture profile, I have a shortcut for down button of the wheel. Wheel down takes me to the picture profile selection, and that allows me to quickly swap and change between different picture profiles. We discussed the back button focus earlier. What's happening here at the top? What am I using the top buttons for? So I left the red one for recording, which is the default value, moving shooting. But the second one, I changed it, the custom button 2, which is selected now. I've changed that to switching between silent mode on and silent mode off. This allows me to switch between mechanical shutter and electronic shutter. Depending on the artificial light, the environment, if it's very quiet and people are sensitive, I'll quickly switch to silent mode, and that would give me complete silent mode. Just pressing that C2 button, it will change from silent mode to mechanical shutter, or from mechanical shutter to electronic shutter. So we discussed about the back button focus usage, that I'm now using it for switching between left and right eye autofocus, and not for focus and recompose like on DSLR. Now I want to talk to you about the hold button on the lens configuration. All the latest Sony lenses, GM lenses, will have this focus hold button on the lens configuration. So what am I using? I'm recalling a custom settings of the camera. So for custom settings 3 on the camera, I'm saving the settings with very high shutter speed, like over thousands of a second or more, with continuous focus and very responsive focus. And I'm saving all of that for action photography or wildlife or sports, everything that happens very fast. So in a situation where I need that quickly, I'm just pressing the button on the lens and I know I will capture that moment without changing to shutter speed or to manual mode. So that is one of the tips I'm suggesting. On the custom key or dial set, I leave everything as default. I'm going now to quickly show you the video. It's only the differences. I'm not changing a lot. There is one thing I wanted to share with you. So I'm leaving most of the buttons the way I configured into stills, except the fifth one. Instead of the touch off, I'm using it for audio recording levels, so I can quickly adjust those if I need to. These are the audio preamp levels of the Sony camera. Then the other thing I'm doing different, the focus hold button on the lens, I'm using it for quickly changing the file format. Instead of changing from crop to full frame and so forth for A7 IV, I can change to H.265 codec, which allows me to have a better compression, but in A7 IV it's using crop mode for 50 frames per second 4K resolution. That allows me to use a better compression rate and then changing back to full frame immediately on the 4:210 bits, 25 frames per second, where the entire area of the sensor is used to record. That's what I'm using, the focus hold button on the lens. The only other difference in filming or movie mode compared to stills is that I set up my control wheel to changing the ISO. When is that important? In video, you can have different dynamic in the sense of sensibility of the sensor, of the darkest areas of your frame and the most exposed, the highlights and the shadows is different depending on your ISO. So, and depends also on the sensor and the camera. Different for S3, different for A7 IV. So in this case, you would like to be close to that native ISO to get the most out of the video while you keep the rest of your variables in place. I will create a dedicated video on how to record best and film with A7 IV. Just wanted to show you the custom keys for playback your captures. Looking at the rear buttons, I'm using C1 to select the card that I'm playing the media from. The other settings are default. For custom button 3, it's going to protect the image. For function, it's going to send. It's going to work as a send button. These are the default values. However, I'm changing one for C2. So the button on C2 at the top is now used for ratings. While I'm looking through the photos, if I get a break during a wedding, I'm quickly pressing that button once or twice depending on what I see. Then it's easier for me to do the filtering when I get the photos downloaded. This concludes the last section of the video, which is configuring your custom keys. It doesn't mean this is the best option. There are many other variants and combinations you can use. It's just the one I found very useful and suitable to my style and what I need. I really hope you found this video useful, and if you liked it, please do click that like button and also consider subscribing. It's a free way you can support this channel so that more and more videos like this one can be created. Let's conclude with the takeaway of today's video. We've started with generic settings. We moved on to the quick menu and we discussed the favorite or shortcut settings. Lastly, but not at least, we cover the custom buttons and back focus button configuration on your Sony Alpha mirrorless cameras, and we used A7 IV as an example. Thank you for your time. If you have any suggestions of what you'd like to see next covered, please use the comment section of the video.